Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Caron Blau-Rothstein, and I'm the Director of Community Planning and Allocations for the Jewish Federation, and I want to welcome you to this week's Weekly Wednesday. Over the last few months that we've been hosting this program, our team has worked hard to bring you timely content with speakers who are experts in various fields and have brought us important perspectives, knowledge, and resources on what is happening around us at this unique and particular time. It's been over 100 days now. I know that's kind of hard to say out loud for me, that we've been isolating, social distancing, modifying our lives, and experiencing our day-to-day in challenging and unusual ways. It's really been a lot to take in and for our bodies and our minds to process. It almost feels as if we're running a marathon, somewhat against our will, that we definitely didn't train for. Today, our webinar will help us explore how we can rely on inner tools to nurture and sustain us in this difficult time. We welcome Rabbi Jonathan Slater, Senior Program Director from the Institute for Jewish Spirituality, to teach us about mindfulness and meditation through a Jewish lens, giving us an opportunity to get a taste of such an experience. But first, let me tell you a little bit about Rabbi Slater. Jonathan was ordained by Jewish Theological Seminary in New York City and served congregations in Northern California for over 20 years before joining IJS 20 years ago. He co-directs the Institute's Clergy Leadership Program, teaches on multiple programs and retreats, and works closely with the IJS board. Jonathan enjoys living in the New York City suburbs, teaching meditation at the JCC in Manhattan, and visiting with his 7 grandchildren around the country. I'm sure that's been very virtual of late. Before I turn the call over to Rabbi Slater, a reminder that after his presentation, there'll be an opportunity for Q&A, and we'll share some of the questions that you all emailed us in advance, and also there's an opportunity to use the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen. Rabbi Slater.
Thank you, Caron, and thank you, citizens of the Portland and the General Federation of Portland, for inviting me to be here with you today. My work with the Institute is largely grounded both in the teaching of mindfulness meditation in the Jewish context and in the integration of Hasidic texts in our work with meditation. And we're going to do some of that today. The Institute is primarily concerned with offering contemplative Jewish practices to support and deepen Jewish life. Very much, you may have had the experience that in your own education as an adult, as a child, that a lot of what we've been taught in our lives is what we should think about being Jewish. And a lot of that is very good. You know, certainly studying Jewish history is important to understanding where we come from, understanding the influences that have shaped Northern American Jewish life, certainly over the course of the centuries. Understanding Jewish philosophy, even understanding Jewish theology is very important as an intellectual undertaking. But very often, what we learn with the head does not translate easily or quickly to the heart or to the body. And so much of the work that we've been doing in the Institute is to bring the study from the head to the heart and the body, to ground in what we know to be true from our own direct experience, not only what we study in terms of words or texts. And so today I'd like to look at a text initially to ground us in a framing for what Jewish mindfulness may be about, then to do some practice, and then to study the conclusion of the text to relate the conclusion to what we just did, and to how Jewish mindfulness can become an important part of a person's life in general, and deepening certainly our Jewish lives, our spiritual lives, and our religious practice. So Rachel, if you'd put up the first slide. That's my name. That's our organization. It's jewishspirituality.org for anybody who's looking. And here's the text that I'd like to look at with you. It's based on 2 verses, actually one phrase, actually just 2 words from the 2nd paragraph of the Shema. Now, those from a Reform background, Reconstructionist background, may not be so familiar with this passage, as it was excised from the prayer books and replaced with either other readings or just completely ignored because of its Deuteronomic framing, which is reward and punishment. And it's the paragraph that says, if you truly devote yourself to love God with all your heart and all your soul, then I will give you rain in due season, and you'll have bumper crops, and you'll eat and be satisfied. But here's the verse that I'd like to look at with you. Hishamru lachem. Take care not to be lured away to serve other gods and bow to them. For Adonai's anger will flare up against you, and God will shut up the skies so that there will be no rain, and the ground will not yield its produce, and you will quickly perish from the good land that Adonai is assigning to you. So that's the punishment side of it. The piece that I want to look at is this phrase, and you will quickly perish. Va'avadetem mehera. Lalechet le'ibud, right? It means to disappear, to be completely lost, to be gone from all memory or mind. And this will happen quickly, according to this passage from the book of Deuteronomy. But I'd like to then frame it in terms of a reading of the Baal Shem Tov, who classically would come upon a phrase in the biblical text and say, wait a minute, I understand what it meant then. What does it mean now? So teaching the Baal Shem Tov from this book, Tzorah Chaim, a 19th century book, clearly not based on direct knowledge of what the Baal Shem Tov taught, but came by oral tradition. He says, we must constantly seek to cultivate a balanced mind and not to be hurried, right? So just that in itself. I don't know if that's been a sermon that you've heard or a teaching in class, but that as a general practice, as a spiritual orientation, as a way of engaging in our lives, that we should seek to have a settled mind and not be hurried. I suspect that for many of us, those of us who've not been on the front lines, who are not required workers in grocery stores or auto mechanics or repair persons or mail carriers or doctors or nurses or hospital administrators and the like, that those of us who have not had to go out to work, that we've been at home. We may be working from home, but working from home is quite different from working at someplace else. First of all, to work someplace else, you have to leave earlier. To work from home, you have to go from the kitchen to the den or your bedroom or the basement, wherever it is that you set up your home office. To work from home means that you're not likely to be interrupted by somebody who just comes and knocks on the door and says, hey, can I talk to you? To work from home means that there are those added minutes or hours not taken up by commuting, not taken up by other things that impede on our work and impede on our lives, to perhaps walk more slowly in the neighborhood, even if we're masked. And perhaps it's been your experience, it was certainly mine here in the Northeast, that walking around our neighborhoods through the months of March and April was a revelation, because I could see from day to day and week to week the unfolding of spring, the transformation daily and weekly in the buds on the red maple, or the unfolding of the apple blossoms, and how the color green changes over time from the beginning of spring to now full summer. When we're not hurried, we actually come into a more direct relationship with our own lives. And the Baal Shem Tov then takes this phrase, Va'avadatem mehera, you will quickly perish, and turns it upside down and inside out. And he says we must lose our hurriedness. What he really means is that hurriedness will cause us to perish. So think of the ways in which your life is rushed, in which you experience hurriedness. And think about then what the impact is on your body. Whether you're short of breath, whether your shoulders are like this, whether your muscles elsewhere are tense, whether you have a vein that throbs on the forehead, as mine used to do back in the day, whether you have other physical symptoms that come with being hurried, perhaps anxiety, perhaps you're short-tempered, perhaps you have indigestion. There are all sorts of things that come from living a hurried life, where everything has to be done right now, where there's no time to think or reflect, when there's no space between one thing and another. And practicing mindfulness and engaging in contemplative practice is a way of beginning to orient our lives to be able to not be hurried, even if we do things quickly. I have a story that I love to tell of one of my wife's daughters. She was a teacher in Charlestown in Boston in middle school, teaching high school English, actually. And she would have to leave the house at 5:30 in order to drive across town, in order to get to school in time, in order to get to class, in order to organize herself to begin the school day at the ungodly hour that they would begin high school. And there was one day that she was rushing, and as she rushed out of her car, the bundle of papers that she was holding, was knocked by the car door and fell to the ground, and there they were all over the place. And having been attempting to cultivate some degree of mindfulness and reading the Zen Buddhist teacher from Vietnam, Thich Nhat Hanh, of blessed memory, she was able to say in this moment, oh, look, this is me rushing. And in that moment of observing, this is me rushing, she was able to collect the papers without beating herself up for the fact that she was rushing. It simply was what was true. And so I'm going to invite us now to turn to mindfulness meditation practice. Mindfulness meditation practice, in an answer to a question of, is there a distinction between mindfulness and meditation, is mindfulness meditation is a practice in service of cultivating mindfulness. So mindfulness can be understood as paying attention in a particular way without judgment to the unfolding of our lives. And the particular way is without changing or commenting on what we are observing. And that's the piece of without judging. So mindfulness meditation is practicing that in a very defined and limited program and practice to then learn how that feels in the body, what it feels like in the heart and soul, what it feels like in the mind, so that when we stop meditating, we may bring that greater mindfulness to the rest of our lives. So mindfulness is a way of being in the world that attends to the unfolding of what is as it is, without judgment, in order to be able to more clearly and wisely respond to what is unfolding. Often the question is asked, what is this about not judging? First of all, that's a question that often comes up in Jewish contexts. We're always judging. The soup's not hot enough, right? I don't like the way you make the brisket, right? We all have these complaints, right? We're always judging. It's not this, it's not that, it's too hot, it's too cold. And think about that quality of judging. That often causes pain. Causes pain to the person that we say it to. It often actually causes us a certain amount of pain. because it puts us in conflict with our own experience. Rather than being able to say, this is what is, and then perhaps being able to say, this soup is delicious. I wonder, would it be okay to warm it up? Or to say, you know, your brisket is just like Mama used to make. And know that I didn't like Mama's brisket, but I can say that in a loving way and not be judging. There are times that we have to bring a quality of discernment. We have to know what's right or wrong in a given moment. But so much of our lives is given over to not discernment, but to criticism. And so we can observe that in our own experience when we sit in meditation. We can notice how our own mind calls into question our own experience. So that's enough of my introduction. I'd like to invite you to take a seat. I suspect you're all sitting. So what do I mean by take a seat? I mean to take a seat intentionally. I might invite you perhaps to sit at the edge of your chair as I'm doing. That allows you to sense how your feet and legs actually are engaged in helping you to sit up. It also means that you're likely to sit more upright, which means that you'll be more awake. If you choose to sit back, do try to sit with an orientation and attitude of alertness. However your hands have fallen, they're precisely where they need to be. As they're likely to, it's likely to mean that your arms are at ease and there's no strain in your arms or shoulders. I close my eyes when I meditate. It's one less source of distraction. You may choose not to. If you do, you might want to turn off the screen of your computer or turn away so that you're not distracted by what you're seeing and can hold an open gaze. And for now, simply bring your attention to the sensations of the body. You may notice the sensation of your hands touching each other or touching your thighs, however they may be. You may notice the sensation of your bottom pressing against the chair, or your feet on the floor, or your back against the chair. You may be aware of the temperature gradient across the body. How parts of the body that may not be clothed are cooler. How other parts of the body may be warmer. You may feel movement of air if there's air conditioning or a fan. You may notice more subtle sensation of tingling or vibration in the body. I invite you now to turn the focus of your attention to the rising and falling of the breath in the body. Where do you notice the breath most prominently? Is it in the belly, the chest, the tip of the nostrils? Wherever you sense the breath most prominently, allow your attention to rest there. Holding your attention in the sensation of the breath as it arises and passes away. Ground in the sensation. What you feel in the moment is what is happening in the moment. Sensation only occurs now. When your attention wanders, as it's likely to do, and you notice that you're thinking about something else, daydreaming, planning, remembering, you might simply say, daydreaming, planning, remembering, and gently bring your attention back to the sensation of the breath in the body. If your attention wanders, there's no need for judgment. Your brain, your habit, is simply what's taken over. We're accustomed to thinking about things. And simply notice and bring your attention back to the breath in the body. Take a few deep breaths and bring your attention back to the room. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Practicing meditation in this way has many benefits. I'm sure you've read of them in the newspaper. It can lower blood pressure. It can slow down heart rate. It can improve the mood. There are all sorts of positive benefits. But in bringing our attention to clarity of our own lived experience can also heighten our relationships and deepen our sense what it means to engage in Jewish practice. I'll just throw out a few that we regularly talk about at the Institute. For those 7-8 minutes that we sat together, there may have been moments of frustration, perhaps, or confusion, but I suspect that there were equal moments, if not more, in which you did experience some sense of ease, of just being, of not having to do or be anything other than just who you are right here, right now. In many ways, that's an experience of Shabbat, where there's nothing to do, nothing to produce, nothing to change, where who we are through our work in the world, our persona, the ways we do outside recedes, and who we are in ourselves comes to the fore. You may have had the experience, as I suggested, of your attention wandering and then bringing it back. That is, in some ways, the lived experience of what we call Teshuva. Very often, Teshuva is translated as repentance, but it's much more coming back to the path that we are supposed to be on. Teshuva is returning to proper alignment. Now, that happens, I think, for all of us in our lives. It used to be in the early days of GPS systems that, we'd be tooling along and either we didn't hear the voice or it came on too late and we'd miss the off-ramp or the left turn or whatever it is. And so it'd be, recalibrating. That's what Teshuva is. And that's what we can experience directly in the practice of meditation, to then know what it feels like when we do that sort of realignment in the course of our lived lives. We can also experience biblical stories, as it were, in our own bodies and minds. So that the story of Jacob's ladder, right? He falls asleep, he has a dream, he sees an angel rooted on the ground, its head reaches up to the heavens, and angels of God going up and down on it. Sitting in meditation, it's possible to sense, oh, I know what that experience is. That's what it feels like sitting in my body as the breath comes and goes, right? Coming and going, rising and falling, going up and down on it. And here we have this verse from the book of Deuteronomy that the Baal Shem Tov interprets in order to remind us that hurriedness, rushing, never having a moment to stop and simply be will destroy us. The Baal Shem Tov then goes on, at least as it's reported in Tzor Chaim, that in order to not be hurried, or rather, more importantly, to have a settled mind, because again, it's possible to have a settled mind while you are doing something quickly. There are many things that have to be done quickly. You have to bake matzah quickly. It's got to be done within 18 minutes. You've got to, assemble the ingredients for a certain dish within a certain period of time, or it's not going to come together. Some things have to happen quickly. There are deadlines that we live by. But it's possible to have a deyam yushevet, a balanced mind in the midst of that hurriedness, which then will mean that we won't experience it as being hurried. So the teaching is that we need to cultivate the middle way, neither thinking ourselves great nor feeling ourselves to be worthless. Heaven forbid. I love that, right? It's not it's not great to think that we're great, but the worst thing would be to think that we are worthless. That's a very important teaching. And that's where this piece of not judging comes in. Because what he goes on to say is that in any moment, we could become prideful. And when we notice that arising, we can simply say, oh, here's pride arising. What's really true? It is certainly necessary and legitimate to say, I did that well. But there's a difference between saying, I did that well, and I did that well, and I did it better than Johnny, and I did it better than Susie, and I did it better than anybody else. I'm the best, right? It's not necessary. To know I did it well is sufficient. To be able to say, I did that poorly is also legitimate and is not judgmental. It can be a statement of fact. I did that poorly. I wish to do it better. I will work on doing it better. That's simply a statement of fact without changing how we personally experience that in our own bodies, hearts, and minds. And he goes on to unpack it, that we have to be flexible. We have to be able to move within all of the varieties of feelings and of experiences in the human life that we will experience, that we not go too far to one side or the other, but constantly be attentive to where is this leading me and is it wholesome? And where is this leading me and is it unwholesome? And to bring us back, find some balance moving between the extremes. If we sense some pridefulness, we should move toward the other side. And if we feel some sadness coming on, we should move toward the other end. The teaching of the Baal Shem Tov here is a way of talking about Jewish mindfulness. It is paying attention to what's arising in the heart-mind as thought. It's what's arising in our experience that, if we don't observe it, may lead us off to pridefulness or lead us down the path of worthlessness or sadness, heaven forbid. But if we can catch the arising of the thought, we then realize we don't have to think the thought. We can know the experience and what's true. And so the engagement in Jewish mindfulness is mindfulness in its power of sort of a manifestation, simply paying attention in a particular way without judgment to our moment-to-moment experience. What is Jewish then that we can bring to it is when we can notice how that enlivens our Jewish lives and how Jewish teachings and texts bring us to deepen our understanding of what mindfulness might be. So Rachel, I think you can take the text down now. Thank you very much for doing that. I hadn't asked. Again, think of another great teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. Some of you may be familiar from the High Holiday Liturgy, a verse from Psalms. Al tashlicheni le'et zikna. Don't cast me away in old age. Right? Don't cast me away in old age. Right? The fear of being abandoned, of being lost, is certainly one that we can understand. The feeling of aging and of being ignored, of being pushed aside, of not being listened to, we can certainly understand. But to sense that in some way that we might lose our connection with God is even more painful. And that's what the psalmist is asking. Even if everybody else forgets me, let me know that I am still in your company. Practicing mindfulness in a Jewish medium might be a way to cultivate a sense of presence. Now, it doesn't have to be God's presence, but presence in the sense of our own aliveness and our aliveness to ourselves. That we can know and care for ourselves. Because practicing mindfulness by not judging, by learning the content of our heart-mind, is a way of coming into a relationship and befriending ourselves. So we can cultivate a sense of presence, which could be God's presence, but a sense of presence to ourselves, so that we know that we're not abandoned. The Baal Shem Tov once again takes that verse and he says, this is what the words of prayer say. Don't cast me off because I've become old, right? Anybody who goes to synagogue regularly knows that you open up the book and the words are not magically going to have changed since last week. It's the same words. And it's likely that you will read either the same ones as last week or the ones from 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. What mindfulness allows us to do is to cultivate curiosity and the ability to be new with what is familiar. Right? Mindfulness is the antidote to same old, same old. Because there is no same old, same old. There is nothing that happens again. No experience that we've had in our lives has ever been the same as any other experience. They may be similar and they may be familiar, but they're never the same. Part of cultivating mindfulness is cultivating the capacity to then know intimately and notice clearly what is different in what is the same. And therefore that which seems repetitive and habitual, we can suddenly make fresh and new. It's a tall order, I admit, but it is of value because then it changes our relationship to what we do all the time. And I dare say, it can also enliven our relationships, right? A teaching story that I heard from my beloved teacher, Sylvia Borstein. Harry and Sadie have been married for 60 years. Sadie always puts the cap on the toothpaste tube. Harry never does. Over and over again, over the course of 60 years, Sadie complains, Harry, would you put the cap back on the toothpaste tube? Not one day, not 2 days, not 60 years. One day, Harry, for whatever reason, wakes up and puts the cap on the toothpaste tube. Sadie walks in, sees the cap on the tube and says to Harry, so Harry, now you're not brushing your teeth. Right? Oh, I noticed the cap is back on the tube. I make an assumption. What is what must be. What is now? What was must be now. If I can say, oh, that's unusual. I wonder what's going on. Harry, did you brush your teeth? Harry, are you feeling okay? Harry, I saw you put the cap on the toothpaste tube. Thank you so very much. Whatever it is. When we cultivate mindfulness, we can be present to our own lives and the lives that we live with others in a very different way. So I'm going to finish my sermon, my talk right now, so I can try to address the questions that were sent in earlier. And if there are other questions that you want to submit through the Q&A, please do. Again, I'm really, really grateful for the questions that you asked because they are wonderful questions. So one of the questions was, what are some signs or benchmarks that one is succeeding in meditation? When you stop asking, am I succeeding? In meditation, it's not a matter of success. There's nowhere to go. There's nothing to get. There's nothing to do. The issue for us is, do I notice a change in my experience? It can also be that over time, I can notice that my attention wanders less. I can notice that when my attention wanders, I'm able to bring it back with greater gentleness. I can notice that I'm able to observe thoughts and not think them. Whatever it is, it's a matter of noticing that what I do in meditation, I'm doing more and with greater ease. But in terms of success, if we're going to talk about success, it is rather a matter of, do I see what I'm cultivating in my mindfulness meditation practice actually extending out into the world and changing the way I relate to other people? So if I find that I'm sitting behind a car at a red light and the light changes to green and the car in front of me doesn't move and my hand is not automatically on the horn, that might be a sign that I am succeeding. Not because I'm good at meditation, but because meditation has helped me to cultivate a degree of mindfulness, which then supports patience and equanimity, curiosity. Is the person in front of me okay? Did they fall asleep? Did they have a stroke? Are they engaged in conversation or listening intently to the radio? Is there something I should know? Rather than, you idiot, get moving. Right? If that's my reaction, more meditation may be prescribed. So that the question is not about succeeding in meditation. Meditation is a tool to cultivate our inner life and the capacity to be present to our lives as we live them. And once again, it's not getting anywhere. I don't want anybody to think, at least from my experience and what I've been taught and what my experience and my teaching is in meditation, it is not about stopping thoughts. It's not about emptying the mind. I don't think that's possible. It's not possible for me. But what I would say is, can I observe the flow of thoughts without being caught by them? Can I know that this flow of thoughts, well, maybe interesting, is empty of independent meaning? Because the thoughts can flow, nothing happens. They just flow. But as soon as I get caught by a thought and start thinking it out and retelling the story about the phone call I had with so-and-so, and they said this and I said that, and the other thing happened and I slammed down the phone and they were really terrible. Once that happens, then the thought gains some substance and I've made it into something new. I'm remembering and rehearsing what happened in the past. Past isn't happening, it's happening in me now because I'm telling the story. And when I can simply observe, that was a thought, that was an unfortunate occurrence, I felt badly, but it passed. The thought is empty. That's a very different thing. How do we help people get to a place where they can focus on what they need to do during such a turbulent, uncertain time? We may feel done, but we're really in a marathon. So what do we do with restlessness? Again, observe restlessness, right? Notice what happens. So true confessions. For a variety of reasons, since I moved from California to New York, part of which was in order to marry my now wife, I have had more time available. She would go off to school to teach at Sarah Lawrence, and I would be home. So I often would be in the kitchen, and I have come to have it reflected back to me, and I know very well that I get possessive about the kitchen. But there are also times when I'm not in charge, or my wife has started, and I watch myself pace in and out of the kitchen, back and forth, because I want to not interfere. It's not my job. I don't want to comment. I don't want to take over. And I don't want anything that I do to communicate discomfort. But I know internally that I'm uncomfortable. So I walk out of the room and I walk back in and I walk back out again. I notice restlessness. If you're noticing restlessness of what am I going to do? I can't stay at home all the time. You might then inquire, is there something that I can do that is safe for me that will also be new and entertaining? So you might find out, is there a way to learn to play chess online, to get singing lessons online? Can I learn to recognize bird calls? There are all sorts of things available to us now that then we can take into what may still be our very limited lives and suddenly have something quite rich, something new to bring to our attention. The other thing I would say is, just as being hurried, one can move quickly without feeling hurried. One can be bored or be in a period in where there's nothing happening and not experience it as boredom, because I recognize, oh, I can pay attention to my life, which is unfolding. There are thoughts and feelings here. It's not boring. I can look out the window. It's very interesting to see people come and go. I look out a window from my desk here and I can see what's going on the street. It's all very interesting. That relieves boredom. Restlessness. When I jump up to go do something, right? What am I getting up to do? What is that impulse? And if I can feel into the impulse, again, without judgment, you didn't do anything wrong. It's really a reaction to a feeling. Can I sit with the feeling? This is uncomfortable. I want to have diversion. I want something else to be going on. I don't like what's happening. All of that is painful. And if our response to that pain is to say, this is painful, it is what is right now, I can tolerate this pain and allow it to pass because it will. That is practicing mindfulness. How can those who have a lot of chaos in their house right now, like young kids working from home, find a place for mindfulness in their lives right now? I think it's important to create moments of buffer. That is, if it's possible to move from being among family to a space where one works, to allow for a few minutes simply to sit and breathe and to let go of what was going on before and prepare for what's about to happen. The same way, finishing a piece of work and knowing that there's chaos in the house or kids to be attended to or dinner to be made, to take 5 minutes to sit and breathe, simply to sit and be with oneself, without judgment, without comment, without concern for what's about to happen, but simply to say, I'm here, I'm present, I'm alive, I'm okay, I'll be able to do this. In the midst of it, right, the other thing is to use the quality of mindfulness, which is cultivating curiosity. Kids are suffering at least as much as adults, if not more. Kids actually grow through their interactions with other kids. Their minds develop through their interactions. They learn a tremendous amount, not by sitting and having somebody talk to them or working in workbooks, but by playing on the playground and coming up with games and building forts and so on. Kids who are isolated from other kids are actually suffering. Cultivating mindfulness as the adult in the room is cultivating the ability to take a breath, recognize I'm about to blow, and either say, sweetheart, I really want to listen to you, but I need to take a minute just to calm down so I can pay attention. Or if I can collect myself enough and take that breath right here, turn to them and say, what's going on? Right? I don't understand this. And be curious enough to allow them to actually come into a relationship with their own lives. Because they are not adults. And there are a lot of things that they don't know. But given enough space and time, and love and care and attention, they know what they're feeling. And if they're permitted to say it, that already changes how they are. It may be that time doesn't allow that. The most important thing is, again, not to judge. To be able to say, I can't deal with this now. You have to sort it out yourselves. Whatever it is, and come back to it later. The most important thing may be to come up with some new routines around bedtime of talking things through, where you really have to listen. Not that you have to listen, but because you've put everything else aside, you've chosen to listen. Does practice have to be daily? It's optimal to be daily, but again, you can practice sitting in your chair. You can practice walking. You can practice lying down. You can practice standing up. The more frequent and regular your practice is, the more it will become ingrained in you, and you'll develop the habit of practice, and also you'll be cultivating mindfulness more. Does it need to be a consistent time of day? It's helpful, again, because then you know you're doing it. If it comes, say, I'm going to meditate in the morning, and then you say, well, I'll do it at lunchtime. You're not going to do it at lunchtime, and it won't do it at night. So trying to maintain it at a certain time during the day, or make sure you've penciled it in your calendar and actually do it then, that's better. And there are certainly online tools. I believe that the Times just recently, or somebody else just reviewed a bunch of online apps to support meditation. You can check that out. How can I stay calm when my friends are practicing risky social distancing? I think that one, recognize that you're experiencing fear, that rather than judging them first, that you recognize that you feel that their behavior is creating a risk for you. When you can recognize that, you can respond from that place rather than from anger. Say, I'm sorry. I don't feel safe in these circumstances. If you prefer to, behave like this, I'm going to have to absent myself. I love you a lot. I care for you deeply. I want to remain friends. I'll talk to you on the phone, get together on Zoom, but I can't go to the bar. I can't go out for dinner. I can't come over to the house unless we're sitting in the back porch. Whatever it is, but for it to come from love. And the other is to have a lot of compassion for yourself and for them, to know that the compassion that you hold for yourself is you're not doing anything wrong, as painful as it feels. And compassion for them is to say, they're also suffering. They're not behaving this way out of malice towards you, for sure. They're also suffering, and to have compassion for that. And in terms of bringing these resources to first responders or healthcare providers, I think certainly if there are skilled practitioners and teachers in your community, that through the Federation, you can be in touch with all of the professional organizations. And I'm sure that they'll be delighted to have help and support. I know that in Manhattan, a colleague of mine has been providing 5 minutes of meditation through an app that the hospital provides, I believe, where nurses kind of just turn their heads to the wall for 5 minutes and are able to breathe and come into a relationship with themselves once again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi. That was really amazing. And I hope that everybody who's joined us today was invigorated and inspired. One of the things that you said, one of the things that's been going on in my house is people are talking about how much this is like Groundhog Day. And I was really struck by you saying that things might be similar, but they're not the same, and that mindfulness can really help you find the different and what is the same. And that makes me very excited to retry a mindfulness practice. I tried to do it during a sabbatical a couple years ago, and you've inspired me to try again. So thank you. And I want to thank everybody. And I would encourage you, by the way, to go on the Institute for Jewish Spirituality website. There are a lot of wonderful opportunities. They're doing yoga. They're doing daily mindfulness. You can go on the Facebook page. There's some really wonderful tools that Rabbi Slater and his colleagues are putting out there for all of us at this time and all the time. And I know you're doing a virtual online retreat, So there's lots of opportunities for us to connect. And speaking of connecting, we'll be back with you next Wednesday, although at a special time because our guest next week is coming to us live from Israel. So we'll be at 1 p.m. instead of 4 p.m. to hear Portland native Rich Brownstein talk about a very different topic, a little more serious, 75 years of Holocaust films, from The Great Dictator to Schindler's List to Jojo Rabbit. You'll get some information tomorrow about how you can sign up. And we're doing this program in collaboration with the Next Generations group of second and third generation Holocaust descendants. And again, thank you all this afternoon. And I hope that you have a mindful evening. Thanks to all.
Thank you.